Good morning. It is Thursday. It is the 16th of October 2025, and we are at civil war. I'm in a war now. I'm in a war between Sean Plunket, the platform, and the Broadcasting Standards Authority. I'm in the middle of it. I feel like Gaza. Do you feel like a Palestinian this morning, just quietly?
Oh, I'll have to break out. I'll have to break out my machine gun or something, I suppose.
Now, wait on. Just what I have just said is going to spark a complaint to the Broadcasting Standards Authority. You know, no, that's reaching the poor taste or bad taste or something like that, discriminating against a group of people. There's some vexed left-wing nutter out there who was already poised before their keyboard, typing out a letter complaint, sending it off to Broadcasting Standards Authority. The chilling and dead hand of. We'll talk about it a little bit later on, but gosh, can I say the broadcast, the platform's been going for how long? May, June, July, August, September. I'm into our fifth month, so 3 years and 5 months. And I need to declare an interest straight up here, and just so that. But I do know the chairperson of the Broadcasting Society. Her name is Susie Staley. She is a lawyer resident in Dunedin, and you won't believe this, she has been my wife's lawyer. All right, so there you go. I need to declare that interest straight up. And so I am aware of Susie Staley and know her socially. All right, not well, but I've actually been to her place, actually, just so I want to put all this out because, you know, and we've probably only had, I've probably only seen her twice in the last 5 years. But we have talked to her because at one stage she was very interested in running for the mayoralty of Dunedin. Gosh, when would that be? 9 years ago? Could have won it too, actually, just quietly. She was the head of the fashion show in Dunedin, which was a big deal down there. Was a lawyer. I don't know how she would have ended up on the Broadcasting Standards Authority. It wasn't... and I'm not aware that she had any particular background in broadcasting before doing so. But I would suggest to you it was her legal connections that largely ended up in, had her ending up in that role. Subsequent to that, I met her at a social occasion. Now, when would that have been? End of last year. In Dunedin, I think it was the Port of Otago celebrations. They had their 150th. I can't remember. It's one of them anyhow. And at that stage, and twice, she had mentioned to me socially that they were trying to bring Sean, she was aware of the fact that I worked for the platform, and they were trying to bring Sean Plunket into the fold. Now, as I understood that, that was sort of by persuasion, not by coercion. And so I was a bit surprised, I have to say, when Sean rang me, yesterday, day beforehand, and said he'd received this letter from the Broadcasting Standards Authority, and that they were using coercion, not persuasion, in which to try and enforce their rather chilling hand upon free speech and the platform in general. Now, although in the last, 12 to 24 hours, this issue of free speech, the platform, the Broadcasting or the Standards Authority, has obviously hit the media. Surprise, surprise. I mean, I don't know why the Broadcasting Standards Authority thought that this could be, done behind closed doors. It's just odd to me. You obviously don't understand the media that you're meant to be policing if you think you're going to send a letter that in actual fact says you've made a secret decision and you're going to start now to impose yourself upon the content that's broadcast on the platform. I mean, it's just sort of weird. Why would you think that that would suddenly be held in secret and confidential? Boy, you don't understand the platform, but boy, you sure as hell don't understand the media in New Zealand in general. But put that to one side. The reality is that the idea will have emanated, I suspect, not from Susie Staley as the chair of the Broadcasting Standards Authority. It will have come from the Secretariat and from the Chief Executive. They will have put it up as their attempt to impose themselves upon a whole new range. And of course, the platform might be at the cutting edge of this assault or attack on free speech by the Broadcasting Standards Authority. But it isn't just them. So I'm thinking to myself this morning, oh, you're in trouble, Reality Check Radio, for example. I mean, I know they're not of the same, what's the best word? They're not of the same background as the platform, but nonetheless it'll affect them. I'm also thinking of left-wing broadcasters like, was it Bomber Bradbury or Bummer Bradbury or whatever his name is? I'm sorry, I'm not aware. It's not a show I've actually watched, and I can't quite work out if it's Bomber or Bummer because I don't know. But it's pure ignorance on my part. So I would have thought that sort of show's brought in as well. In fact, what isn't? And it's a very, very, very long hand that the Broadcasting Standards Authority is thinking imposing upon essentially anything that fits the internet. Because if you listen to what they say, the concept of broadcast means anything that is transmitted in this country for any purpose at all, for the purpose of entertainment, discussion, whatever it might be. And so they have decided to reinterpret, because you've got to remember that for 3 years and 5 months, they haven't had anything to do with the platform, and they haven't entertained any complaints of, because they know that the platform and its ilk are outside of their purview. For 3 years, 5 months, they've thought that, and then suddenly they've decided it is. And you really ask the question, why would you? I mean, you've got enough trouble policing terrestrial television, radio, in the main. Why would you decide that you're going to extend yourself to the internet? Where's the threat? Where's the denigration of peoples? Where's the promotion of illegal and antisocial behaviour? Where's the discrimination and denigration? Where's the balance, lack of balance or lack of accuracy? Given that these are the aegis, or this is the, if you like, the Broadcasting Authority's particular view of the New Zealand media, and that's what they're there to impose as a sort of quasi-policeman. And the funny thing about the internet is that we are extraordinarily opinionated anyhow. It's the reason why the internet and services like the platform have taken off. Listen, can I give an example? And I'm not boasting here. This is just factually true. This particular show reaches over 200, sometimes 250,000 views or listens. So either YouTube on Facebook and YouTube alone. This is not even downloading it through the app or listening to me live now or anything like that. That is just content that is created by this show, just this show, and it can reach up to between 200 and 200. Well, it regularly reaches 200, but up to 250,000 views or listens a week. And I suspect that's the reason. Now, as a really good example of that, can I give you Jack Tame, if you remember, about 4 or 5 months ago, interviewed the Maori activist and leader of the Hikoi associated with Toitū Te Tiriti, we'll come to that a little bit later on, academic lecturer from Auckland University, Eru Kapa Kingi, who has covered himself in infamy in the last week or so. More infamy than you might think. But nonetheless, now my critique of that particular interview on YouTube gained as many views as the people who watched the program, you see? And I suspect that's where the Broadcasting Standards Authority is coming from, as we are shifting our listening and viewing habits from mainstream media. The Broadcasting Standards Authority is desperate to halt that kind of expansion and to impose itself and its values, and I'll come to that in just a second, upon content that it currently doesn't control, who left the mainstream media because they didn't consider it necessarily champion free speech, didn't offer the opinions that are now common and popular in our sector of the world, and didn't broach subjects that the mainstream media shy away from for reasons in part of ideology, but in part because of the chilling overlay of the Broadcasting Standards Authority and their particular values. You see, the Broadcasting Standards Authority at the end of the day is an inherently subjective beast. Most of its appointments including Susie Staley's, were made by the last government and by the last Minister of Broadcasting, yes, you guessed it, Willie Jackson. And Willie Jackson has been on this show boasting about the appointments that he's made as Broadcasting Minister to appoint people to particular roles, whether they were the Board of Radio New Zealand, Television New Zealand, the Waitangi Tribunal, and the Broadcasting Standards Authority, all right, those four in particular. He boasted about how he'd put his fellow travellers there, and he made an awful lot of appointments in the May, can I tell you, that preceded the last general election. In the May that preceded it, when was the election? October, November, it was in October, I think. He made most of these appointments, including to the Broadcasting Standards Authority. The aim was to ensure that his particular ideology, the ideology particularly of the Maori caucus, it has to be said, of the Labour Party, and of the left, survived the wreckage of Labour crashing and burning at the last election. And so it's an old Labour ploy. It's been going for 20, 30 years. Make sure you make these appointments to these bodies that control the dissemination of information in this country and public information, and make sure that after you've gone, you've still got your fellow travellers and ideologues in those key places still influencing the dissemination and the creation of news when you're gone. And listen, we're seeing it brought out in dramatic relief over the last 2 years. Listen, good luck, can I just say, to the Broadcasting Standards Authority versus Plunket. It's sort of like ringside material, popcorn, stuff like that. But because Sean Plunket is not on his own already. Obviously, New Zealand First have come out. Winston Peters has labelled the Broadcasting Standards Authority the Stasi. Oh, that's a big word. The Free Speech Union have come out. This will be, gosh, their latest cause. I can't imagine that anybody that doesn't like free speech and like the idea of what the platform and our fellow travellers are doing, it will become a serious, major cultural and ideological battleground, this particular scrap. It will go to court. I have very little doubt of that. If the Broadcasting Standards Authority have made this decision, they're going to use money and their and their government authority given to them by legislation to put the platform and a whole series of other people in the dock and fight them in a civil case to say that they are accountable and responsible for them. So this has got months, if not years, to go. But it does represent an attempt by ideologues imposed by the last Labour government to still ensure that they can control the news in this country and the information to suit their subjective purpose. If you have a look at the Broadcasting Standards Authority, there isn't probably one of the 8 particular standards that they apply that isn't inherently subjective. Opinion, free speech, balance, quality, accuracy, discrimination, denigration, all of these sorts of words are all inviting of a subjective evaluation. There's no objective test for these sorts of things. I've had many clashes, and this is the other thing I've got to admit this morning to you. I've had many clashes with the Broadcasting Standards Authority in my former employment, with both News Talk ZB and with Radio Live, as a talkback host for both of those 2 stations as well. And what I could never quite get over was that the broadcast, and still can't, is that the Broadcasting Standards Authority on a regular basis seek to truncate freedom of speech and the freedoms that are given to me under the Bill of Rights Act of 1990. I've never quite been able to understand, and they aren't compatible, the Broadcasting Act that sets up the Broadcasting Standards Authority and the Bill of Rights Act are actually incompatible. Over the years, the Broadcasting Standards Authority has evolved somewhat on this issue. It's actually said, and this is despite ruling against me, but it's moved a bit since then, quote unquote, talkback, which I think it regards the platform as, but of course we're not really primarily a talkback show. Certainly not. This one isn't. Talkback's a part of it, but it's not the primary feature. But anyhow, it says talkback is an opinionated environment and is granted some latitude to be provocative and edgy in the interests of robust debate. But it's that word some that determines that whichever people hear any complaint of the Broadcasting Standards Authority, it will be their common ideology that determines whether or not that latitude is given or not. The second aspect of that, though, is, and this is why you get worried about this, this is an invitation for what is known as the bully veto. This is an invitation for the left, who are very, very organised on these things, I have to be honest with you. Fabulously organised. And it's a credit to them, really. But this is an invitation to the left to shut down a station like the Platform, not by the judgments necessarily that come out of the Broadcasting Standards Authority. And remember, they can impose fines. In fact, they can shut stations down if they want to. I think their authority moves that far from memory. No. It's just in dealing with them. And so I remember at Radio Live, one of the things that, and this is the chilling effect of that. I had a program manager, in fact, she was the general manager. She brought a general manager in one day to talk specifically about this, and I'd been generating too many complaints to the Broadcasting Standards Authority. I think only about one of them was upheld, but it didn't matter. The reason that the general manager and the manager involved with Radio Live and Media Works came to talk to me was because they wanted me to tone down my program. And I went, why do you want me to tone down my program? There isn't really a problem. In the one issue on which I had been found against, I sort of thought, yeah, I can see where they're coming from. But, on everything else, the Broadcasting Standards Authority had generally ruled in my behalf. And then I went, oh, I know. And then they told me, it's costing us money. It's costing us tens of thousands of dollars, and it could easily go to six figures, they said, just to handle the complaints. So they had to then go through an entire process and a rigmarole before it even got to the Broadcasting Standards Authority. Then they had to argue the case in front of the Broadcasting Standards Authority. In one particular complaint, they bailed because it was going to cost them too much money. And they said, oh, all right, we'll plead guilty to that, even though we're not, because it's going to cost us $30,000 in legal fees to defend ourselves. And that is, the bully's veto at best relief here. That is why it's critical that the Broadcasting Standards Authority must be, because that process will be used by the left to shut down any centre, right or right voice in this country, and any voice that comes up with a dissenting opinion to their own. The other thing, of course, about the Broadcasting Standards Authority is that they're impossibly woke themselves. They have a series of prescriptive values which you would argue of their very existence are a threat to free speech and free thought. And if they were to make those values that they say drive their decision making, I have to say I don't think the Platform would be here for a week, let alone a month, just because of the values that they would impose by also Willie Jackson appointed individuals. So there's the background to that particular issue. All right. And I hope that you do take every opportunity, and I'm sure there'll be every opportunity in the near future, to make your views known on this particular issue. It may require, in actual fact, an amendment to the Broadcasting Act of 1989 to make it explicit. But, can I just say, this is another attempt, despite the government being elected 2 years ago, a centre-right government who wanted to get rid of this nonsense. This is a classic attempt of the sabotage of Willie Jackson and the Labour Party going out, using their people to still stop freedom of thought speech in this country. Surprise, surprise.